All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. And today we are going to be talking about stereotypes within the African American culture. So our title is Stop Acting So Black. My name is Vicki Stafford. I'm a senior here at Iowa State studying performing arts.
I'm Matt Brooks. I'm a sophomore in community and regional planning.
Eva Soria, sophomore in kinesiology and psychology.
I'm Albert Lee, and I'm a sophomore in interior design.
All right, and to begin our presentation today, first of all, we're going to watch a video, and it highlights some of the stereotypes that have been presented throughout the media during specifically the 1920s to 1940s. And these are just some of the things that have been present during different television shows and cartoons. So we want you to take a look at this first. And as you're watching this video, just try to pull up some stereotypes, because after we get done, we're going to be asking you to give us some stereotypes you saw in the video.
This is the Black Network Company, presenting for the first time the Pullman Porter Shoe Polish Variety Program. Oh, yeah.
What is that, McNutt? Now listen, Gates, you run along and chase yourself. This pie ain't ready yet. Well, what kind of pie is that, McNutt? That's a blackbird pie. Oh, a blackbird pie? There ain't no such thing as a blackbird pie. Why, don't you contradict me? Don't you remember that song I used to sing for you when you were a little hippie? Niners slices in the kitchen. Here's the reason why. Cause the master said to take the blackbird to make the sweetest kind of pie.
So, what were some of the stereotypes you guys saw in that video?
Well, they were depicted to have big lips. They liked the chicken. Their jobs were like a maid, or like they worked in the train. And then for like, you can kind of say like the lighter skin had like a decent job compared to like the darker skin.
Yep. Very good. What are some other images you guys saw?
Big Mama.
Big what?
Big Mama.
Big Mama. Yep.
A lot of singing and dancing, which are particularly associated with African Americans.
Yep. Yep.
Some of them you couldn't really distinguish if it was supposed to be a person or an animal.
Yeah. So a lot of like dehumanizing images. They almost were like monster or like very animal-like. Definitely. And we said the same things. Big lips. You guys covered it. Watermelon. Fried chicken. Kind of they're portrayed as almost crazy at some points. Like again, they're going back to that not human. And then as well as illiterate or uneducated. You see the way they speak. A lot of times they speak with slang. There's a lot of ain't in there. Or, so if, for example, like acting, it'd be actin' black. So they do a lot of slang, and again, this is just another way to dehumanize these images or dehumanize the African American culture. So, our question then, and with this video, like it said, it's in the 1920s and the 1940s, so a lot of people, or some people might argue that a lot of these stereotypes are outdated or older, but how many of you guys would say multiple of those stereotypes that you saw in that video you were aware of before this class, or you were aware of in society, or have you seen that? Alright, pretty much the whole group. So, we would like to argue that stereotypes never go away, they simply evolve or are modified. So, a present day stereotype of African Americans or blacks are athletes, which is something Matt will talk about in a second. So, that leads us to, what is it to act black? Like, we're going to ask that, do you guys know what, if you were someone saying, stop acting so black, what does that mean? Katrina?
Don't be ghetto.
Don't be ghetto, yep. And let's go further with that. What is it to be ghetto?
It's like trashy, lower class.
Yep.
Uneducated.
Yep, so a lot of like negative connotations. Guillermo?
I guess, I mean, stop, portraying these stereotypes, I guess,
Yep.
speaking with that whole accent.
Exactly, you're both completely correct. So basically it's when a person lives up to or seemingly represents the stereotypes associated with their cultural group. That person is accused of acting black. Now on the flip side of that, what is it to act white? And by that, what does it mean? When we say, oh, stop acting so white, why do you think people say that? Or African Americans a lot of times will say this to other people in their group or friends. A black person might say this to another black person, well, stop acting so white. Why do you think they'd say that?
They don't want to be associated with being white. They
Yep.
don't like that.
Yep.
Don't be a sellout to your group.
Yep, yep. Like there's kind of a sense of camaraderie, and when someone steps outside that group, there's like it almost feels like they're being betrayed. Definitely. So for some, Key, go ahead. You sure? All right. So within the African American culture, there's this internal pressure for blacks to listen to the same music, speak the same, live in the same neighborhoods, vote Democratic typically, dress a certain way, share the same attitudes and beliefs and bias. So when people go against that, they're then accused of acting white. But I found a really great quote through my research. Crystalline Karazin, she's actually a well-known author. She writes on issues of diversity and specifically like interracial relationships. And this is what she said, or one of her friends said about what it was to act black and this acting white. The statement of stop acting white is meant to be an insult in the black community because there are no black people in their right mind that want to be called white, lest they lose their black card. But the statement itself is a reflection on our internal belief that blacks are inferior to whites. We all know when someone says a person is acting black, they are talking about something negative. So it's exactly like Katrina said, we have this negative connotation. When you say stop acting so black, we know that it's actually, it's associated with negative, and acting white is associated with something more positive. However, I think one of the best things about this quote, what I really liked, is when African Americans say stop acting so white because they're trying to distance themselves from this white superiority, they're actually just validating the fact that in our society it is an unsaid rule that whites are superior. So with that, now Matt is going to talk a little bit about more stereotypes. More specifically, we're going to look at young black males and analyze what kind of stereotypes are prevalent today in our society.
Okay, I know we talked about some stereotypes from like But I want you to list out some stereotypes of specifically young African American men, like say people our age.
Player.
You can jump.
Muscular.
Basketball player.
Football.
Those are all like stereotypes that are commonly seen in a group. But basically all three of those stereotypes boil down to three main factors. Society views African American people as less intelligent, they have lower moral standards than other people groups, and they are physically imposing. And all stereotypes, they all have they may seem like there's a sense of being true, but they're really because you don't realize correlation and causation, or it's because you're exaggerating what you've seen. Like, it is true that only 18% of African Americans have a college degree, which is 12% lower than the national average. But you have to consider the fact that 27% of African Americans live below the poverty line. So it's a lot harder for African Americans to have a college degree. So it's a cycle that it's more of a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than black people being less intelligent. When it comes to moral standards, in the state of Maryland, they did a study that proved that 76% of their traffic, people that were pulled over on suspicion of drug charges were African American. When that's out of ratio, because 20% of black drivers in Maryland are black. But the thing, in the end, they're actually African American people are less likely to actually be having drugs than say if you're a white or Hispanic. And when it comes to physically imposing, you may say well, I see athletes on TV all the time. It is true that 78% of the NBA is black and 65% of the NFL is black. But say for quarterbacks, 81% of quarterbacks are white in the NFL, and that's considered the value position, the honorable position, the smart position. So once again, it may seem like it's a positive thing, but it's not really a positive thing. And the black stereotype spectrum, oftentimes in the media, they have to fit African American characters have to fit a perfect balance of stereotypes. Like if they fulfill too many stereotypes, it's considered a negative thing. Like Michael Vick, NFL quarterback, being an athlete was considered a good thing, but once he started the dogfighting, all you heard was criticism of African American culture and that all NFL players come from the ghetto and they're just stupid people in general. But if they act too white, that's also a negative thing. Like in the famous TV show, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Carlton Banks, he's always the point of jokes of his cousin Will because he doesn't act white and he's not being true to himself. These may seem like isolated examples, but they really all do go back to psychology, and that's what Ethan's going to talk about.
So as Matt said, we're going to tie this back to psychology, and Al will present a narrative of an incident that happened earlier, and then we'll return back to the terms. So for now, just try and get a good base of what the terms are. You don't have to know what they are, just try and be familiar with them. So social cognition is an interface between social and cognitive psychology. It examines how people understand and make sense of the world, themselves, and others. So how psychology defines stereotypes is that they're generalized beliefs about the attributes that characterize members of a social group. So we're going to move on to heuristics, and those are rules or principles that allow people to make social inferences rapidly and with reduced effort. So Kahneman and Tversky propose three main ideas behind heuristics. The first is that people rely on heuristics to make social inferences. The second is that heuristics simplify the process of making those social inferences. And the third is that heuristics sometimes lead to faulty reasoning. So you want to remember that third one because we'll come back to that. So the role of stereotypes are oversimplifications of our social world, but useful since they help progress large amounts of information and bring to order our social life. However, their very strength is also their weakness. There are 4 consequences behind stereotyping people that Campbell came up with, and the first is that stereotypes overestimate the differences between groups. The second is that stereotypes underestimate differences between individuals with social grouping. Third, stereotypes distort reality since the overestimations and underestimations in 1 and 2 about oversimplifying. And the fourth is that stereotypes are usually negative and they serve to belittle or discriminate against their groups. So this is what happens when people live up to the stereotypes and or act in ways that people make them live up to it. So it'll lead us to see what we expect to see or what we want to see, because we already have a generalized idea of what they should be acting like. If you meet someone, you base your impression within the first 8 seconds you meet them. Stereotypes may also lead us to behave in ways that will confirm our expectations, which lead to the self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm sure we've all heard of this and what it is, but self-fulfilling prophecies are when expectations we hold about ourselves and other people causes the other person to behave in ways that are consistent with our original expectations. So the self-fulfilling prophecy seems to be common, but they require a number of steps to be present for the error to occur. Sorry. So the first step is that the perceiver holds expectations about another person. The second is that the perceiver behaves in a way that are consistent with those expectations. The targeted person interprets and responds in ways which reciprocate. The targeted person internalizes perceiver's expectations, and which leads to the self-fulfilling prophecy in which the perceiver's expectations are confirmed and he continues to behave in the same way. So this happens when people live up to our stereotypes, and in other cases when we often hear people say that they're the exception, or that they don't belong to this stereotype, that they are either too white or too black, they don't fit into this box. And that is what happens when we make first impressions. So an example that we talked about in class was with Tim Wise, and we'll come back to that earlier, with Tim Wise and Christopher Matthews. So when you form impressions, there's a continuum model which explains how people form impressions of others. So the first is initial categorization, is when you categorize someone that you meet. The second is you confirm the categorization, so you match them to the category. The third is recategorization, which is matching them to the subtype. So in each of these steps, if the match is good, you would stop processing because they fit your stereotype. And if the match is bad, you'd have to pay more attention to them because clearly they're not fitting what you thought they should be fitting in that stereotype. So the fourth is if they don't fit any of these stereotypes, so we can use the example of a black man. If they're really smart and point forward, they didn't meet any of these, so you have to pay more attention to them and realize they're not a typical black man. So the fourth is a piecemeal integration, so you attend closely to that person and you base your impressions on personal characteristics. So like I said, Tim Wise made a reference, and it was Christopher Matthews from MSNBC quoted, "For an hour I forgot he was black." So he was using the fourth piecemeal integration because he realized he was a black man, but he had to go further than that, realizing he took the fact that he was black out of it. So by saying, "I forgot he was black," made the impression that he was saying he was really smart, which didn't go with illiterate, and he was well-read and educated, but didn't go with stupid or dumb, the regular stereotypes. So now Al is going to be reading a narrative that we will soon come back to, so if you remember those side terms, we'll just walk you through it again.
On the night of February 26, 2012, at a gated community in Twin Lakes, Florida, a neighborhood watch, George Zimmerman, called to the authorities reporting the sighting of a suspicious person. After the call, Zimmerman would proceed to chase the hooded individual, who's known to be Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old high school junior. Trayvon Martin contacted his girlfriend, detailing that he was being followed and chased by a strange man, but managed to get away. Later, though, Zimmerman would state that he lost track of Martin, but found him again shortly after. After a brief exchange of words, the teen violently attacked Zimmerman, and in self-defense, Zimmerman shot and killed Martin. At the time of death, the teen contained a bag of Skittles, a can of iced tea, a wallet,